Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Red Circle Sorcery number 6 through 11. This was a title from Red Circle Comics Group, which was an imprint of Archie Comics in the early 70s, around 74, 73. Archie wanted to expand beyond just their teen kiddie comics. And they started off with, they had a comic called Chilling Adventures into Sorcery as Told to Sabrina. So it was kind of a bridging comic because it was still drawn by the regular Archie artists, just drawing a little more realistically and kind of doing like G-rated mystery horror stories. That lasted 2 issues. And then it changed its name to just Chilling Adventures into Sorcery. And it got more, adultish. Not really adult. It was still Comics Code and everything, but, it was, they got Gray Morrow to become the editor, the great cartoonist Gray Morrow. We're going to see him all over these. I guess as editor, he could give himself as much work as he wanted, so that's what he did. But Gray Morrow, been drawn since the 50s. Jack of all trades. That guy's done everything. Newspaper comic strips, children's books, graphic design, tons of comic book work. He's done so much over the decades. So at number 6, they changed the title to Red Circle Sorcery, and it ran all the way up to number 11. So I don't have those Chilling Adventures into Sorcery. If I did, I would have started there. But unfortunately, I can't show you those, but I can show you all these, which is pretty much the same title, just with a different name. So let's crack these open. These were all published between like 74 and 75, these 6 issues. Number 6, Gray Morrow cover. Kind of an odd green and red here. It doesn't quite look like a horror comic, but this does. That's a really nice Gray Morrow piece. Scary vampire lady. First story here is beautifully drawn by Gray Morrow. The story's by Steve Skeets and Mary Screens. And Steve Skeets did a lot of stuff in the early 70s for DC mostly. And he was like one of those writers that was a little different than your average writer. He'd always put in quirky, weird little touches to his superhero comics. So kind of interesting. And Mary Screens, if I'm not mistaken, I think worked with Steve Gerber on Omega the Unknown. Mary Screens, is that her? I should look that up, sorry. So, yeah, this is some really nice art. It's called Warrior's Dream. And we see this warrior dude. It's the Dark Ages. And he's a haunted man. He's just been hounded by these bad dreams. He's weary. All he wants is some sleep. And goes to this tavern. And the woman who works at the tavern, the waitress, is just really like getting in his business. And he's just like, listen, just take me to my fucking room, okay? I really want to get to my bed. So cut all this shenanigans out. Look at this art. Just amazing stuff. So finally, she leaves him in his room. And unfortunately, though, he's going to have that dream again. I guess he just keeps having this dream about... he was kind of a ladies' man in his younger days. And there was this one woman who really loved him. Her name was Lorema. And, he promised his heart to her. And then totally jerked her around. And basically, she was all clingy and just be like, no, you can't leave me. And he slaps her. And he kills her on accident. She hit her head when she fell. This is unfortunate. I don't know if all the copies have this weird printing thing. Or maybe it's just this copy, some guy had ink and just spilled ink on the comic. That's actually probably more likely. So I got to get another copy of this. Because this is some really nice art. I don't want to see it marred like that. So I guess all that time since he killed Lorema, he's seen her face. It's almost like her face has been driving him in a certain direction, almost like herding him towards this tavern. And he wakes up, and the woman the waitress from the bar, the tavern, is tying him up. And she says, I'm Josalie, Lorime's sister. Lorime's only a ghost. She could have never really hurt you, so she drove you here to me. But I'm not a ghost, and I am going to hurt you. She's got a knife in her hand. He's like, no. Kind of ends abruptly. These stories are all kind of odd. They're really short, and it seems like a lot of the writers, like, you know, like even your typical House of Secrets or House of Mystery story, they all have like a formula that at least is like, oh yeah, this is going to happen. These will sometimes just end abruptly or have these weird extra plot things shoved into them, which kind of makes them interesting because they're different. And they're all beautifully drawn. Gray Morrow as the editor got a stellar lineup of artists for these comics. They look way better than most, like, your average issue of House of Secrets or House of Mystery, or, in fact, any comic from that time on the newsstands. This looked better than 99% of them. Just the great cartooning involved. This is in every issue. Essays into the Supernatural. This one's The Werewolf. A story by Marv Channing, art by Gray Morrow. Marv Channing is all over these. I don't think this guy did anything else in comics, or not much else. He did all this stuff. I assume maybe he wrote for Archie. I don't know. I couldn't find much about him. And this is just about lycanthropy lore. Nice art again by Morrow. This is a weird one, Out of Practice. And it's written by Phil Suling, the early comics distributor who started the direct market. And I don't think he ever wrote comics before, but he was probably like a fan, and I don't know, they gave him a shot. The art's by Ed Davis. Ed Davis worked for Continuity Associates, Neil Adams' company, and he would just pop up throughout the years, always doing really nice work. But I think in total, he probably only has like 50 comics pages ever published. He didn't do much. I know he did some stuff for the DC War comics in like the late 70s. Other than that, just random stuff. His name pops up here and there. His style's kind of weird here, but kind of interesting. Very like Kaluta, early raw Kaluta, even a little Chaykin maybe, like the early Chaykin. And whatever, this is a kind of silly story. You could tell Phil Suling isn't much of a writer. And this witch guy, he's a doctor. He's basically killing this guy to steal his practice. And he's done it before. I don't know. It's pretty dumb. But I kind of like this weird art. It's pretty raw. But you can see, like, in a few years, this guy could be really good. Death Goes to a Sales Convention. Story by Marvin Channing again. Art by Carlos Pino. Carlo Pino is a Spanish artist who spent decades working for the English comic magazines. All the war comics in the 70s. He did the Judge Dredd comic strip. Not the actual comic book, but the comic strip. Yeah, I think he was drawing until like the 2000s. Still doing English comics. And it's about this guy who's kind of like typical like salesman, sleazy guy who can't wait to go to this sales convention so he can, have an affair, cheat on his wife. And he's buying champagne for this woman who won't put out. He's all pissed off. He's like, you gold digger. So he goes off driving. And this is a really dumb story, weird story. It's, weird and dumb. And all of a sudden, he sees this guy walking on the side of the road, and he has this uncontrollable urge to kill him and run him over. And he does. And when he goes to talk to the cops about it, he kind of lies a little. He says, he just jumped in front of my car. But then they inform him that, there's no record of you staying at the hotel you said you're staying at. In fact, it doesn't even exist, that hotel. We called your firm. They know nothing of a convention. And the airlines have no record of having sold you a ticket. So they throw him in a mental asylum. And then we cut away to this witch. And this guy apparently is paying her to kill. I guess he took care of him, and this guy and another guy killed his wife. That's just so, like, out of the blue. Like, what? So it's pretty silly, pretty stupid, but pretty nice Carlos Pino art. Oh, this is nice. Look at this early Howard Chaykin. Howard Chaykin's really young, but this is pretty good. This is a story by C. Suling, which I assume is Carol Suling, Phil Suling's wife, and art by Howard Chaykin. The Patience of a Cat. It's weird how so many of these stories take place in olden times. I guess they thought that was scarier when things take place in olden times. This guy's wearing like Shakespeare pantaloons or whatever you call those things. So this woman has many suitors, and basically she's a tramp, and this one guy really loves her, and he's just making himself a pest. He's just like, oh, I love you. And she's like, oh, run along, little boy. And he just keeps pestering her. And it turns out she's a witch, and she immobilizes him because he's starting to rough her up. And she turns him into a cat. And she's going to make him her little pet. Basically torture him. Because now this cat has to see all of her other suitors. And of course he's always very jealous and always biting the men who come to visit her. But she keeps him around. I think she gets off on the fact that it's almost like a cuckold thing. Where she's torturing him. So she meets this one guy that she really loves, because these other guys, she pretty much just wanted like beautiful jewelry from them. She was a gold digger. But she meets this one guy where she's just like, oh, I don't care if you give me presents. I'm so into you. And he's not that into her. He's like, actually, your charms grow fewer every day. He's pretty blunt. And so, of course, this infuriates her. And she's going to use some of her witchy ways on him. But he's like, don't you know, in my home country, I am a famous warlock. And he turns her into a bird. And then he takes off, and the last panel is that guy who was turned into a cat is heading towards the bird. It's just desserts time. Really nice Howard Chaykin early art. I have stuff, DC stuff from Howard Chaykin around this time, and it's not as good. He really put his all into this one. Oh, you know what it probably is, because he penciled and inked it himself. I think all the DC stuff I saw by him, he had other inkers. Every issue has a 2-page short story. This one's by T. Casey Brennan. He was a guy who's all over, like fanzine guy and like assistant editor here, and he just pop up on all these comics related magazines. And arts by Gray Morrow. Face of Love, Face of Death. And this is once again Marvin Channing, but art by Vicente Alcazar, another Spaniard. Alcazar's a great cartoonist, just like Pino. Drew for decades, did some stuff for Warren. I think he worked for the English comics as well. But I guess he was good enough to graduate to like Warren black and white magazines, because that was a higher paying market. This guy becomes a DJ, and he's kind of like that late night sexy DJ all the women like to listen to. And he definitely takes advantage of it in this new town where he lives. He has a very active social life, constantly dating women. One night this woman calls. She's got an enchanting voice. She kind of has a crush on her. He's like, let's meet. She can never meet him. And she keeps dating other women. And she calls him up one night and is just like, I followed you and I know you've been out with another girl. If I can't have you, I don't wish to live. So he says, where can I meet you? I'll meet you somewhere. So she says, meet me out at this old barn. And she's a vampire. And she bites him. And I guess the previous DJ, she suckered in, no pun intended, into this barn a while ago. But now he's all drained. So he's going to be her new food source. Very dumb. I like the Vicente Alcazar art. That's a great little inset panel there. I like that. Okay, that's the first issue. Red Circle Sorcery 7. Gray Morrow cover again. First story is by Steve Skeets. It looks like the letter spelled his name wrong. Art by Carlos Pino. A Twist in Time. I love that little logo. Really good logo. This story is just so kind of convoluted and dumb. We see Merlin, and Merlin is looking in his crystal orb, trying to find information that'll help Arthur. But all he can see is this dude. Every time he looks in his orb, he sees this guy from the 20th century. And the man seems to be able to see him. So now from the man's point of view, he thinks he's going insane. He sees this giant head always looking down on him. And then on top of that, he sees this guy Thompson, who he murdered and robbed years before. His specter appears and says, "This is the face of the man who will cause your death." Speaking of Merlin. So, he keeps having these nightmares. He wakes up. And he has a flashback to how he killed Thompson. Once again, it happens. Merlin tries to look in his orb, and all he can see is this fucking guy clogging up his orb. So the guy decides not to sleep. He's like, I don't want to have that dream anymore. So he's just drinking coffee, staying awake at all-night diners. And he's so tired that he's driving around, and he crashes into this wall. The cops come and say, "Hey, did anyone see the crash?" It's so dumb. This guy comes out of the blue and says, "Yes, I did." And he looks just like Merlin. So some guy in the 20th century happens to look just like Merlin. And he says, "I don't understand. The guy took one look at me and freaked out. And then he had his accident." And now we cut back to Merlin. He's like, "Woo, well, I'm glad that guy's dead. He won't be clogging up my crystal ball anymore. I know I can use it. It's about time, if you ask me." So goofy. What a silly comic. That's the thing about these kind of comics, like House of Mystery, House of Secrets. Usually the stories are pretty dopey, but I can always read them. They're so readable to me. Like if you hand me some Secrets of Haunted House with mediocre art and ridiculous stories, I could just sit down there and totally have a good time reading it. I kind of love these little anthology comics, even though they're usually pretty dumb. Another Essays into the Supernatural. This is about the Dybbuk. Dybbuk Schmibik. I said more ham. I don't know why I remembered that just now. Okay, Dybbuk is like an evil spirit in Jewish folklore who possesses people's bodies. Really nice art from Gray Morrow on this one. Once again, written by Marv Channing. The Knife of Jack the Ripper. Marv Channing once again, and Vicente Alcazar. And this one is much nicer. Vicente Alcazar, he draws us really straight sometimes. This is very expressive and very interesting design work. I like this one. So basically we're in Scotland Yard. This Ripperologist, this guy who's writing about the Ripper, is allowed access. And he steals the knife of Jack the Ripper. I guess he dropped a knife at the scene of the crime once. Look at this designiness here. All this black. This looks really good. So he falls in love with this woman whose great-grandmother was one of the victims of Jack the Ripper. He's doing his research. Falls in love with her. And they become quite the item. And that's when he decides to steal the knife. So he steals the knife of Jack the Ripper, and all of a sudden he feels like the knife is talking to him and coercing him. He's having weird thoughts. So it takes over. The knife takes over, and he kills his love. He can't help it. He's possessed by the knife. And then he turns himself into the cops. Once again, not much of a story, but nice to look at. And lovely to hold. Here we have a little ad for Super Cops, which was another Red Circle Comics group comic based on a movie. and Gray Morrow art. And we have a little demonic delineator, Gray Morrow. A little history biography of Gray Morrow with a self-portrait. Oh, this is interesting. The Rivals, story by Marvin Channing, art by Bruce Jones. I never saw Bruce Jones draw for anyone else. He would draw his own comics before he just gave up drawing and just became one of the great writers of comics. But this is him drawing the script of another writer. And this is a pretty good one. In fact, the story reads so much smoother than almost everything else in this. I wouldn't be surprised if Bruce Jones wrote the story, probably laid it all out, and maybe Marvin Channing just did the dialogue, kind of a Stan Lee dealio. But we meet these two kids, Terry and Butch, and they just, ever since they were kids, they hated each other, always beating each other up. They're just bitter rivals. One day, there's this old house in town. This old lady lives there. Everyone kind of thinks she's a witch. And Butch just starts throwing rocks at it. And Terry says, oh, there's my enemy. He seems preoccupied. I'm going to beat the crap out of him. So the witch lady comes out, and she thinks that he was protecting her. He didn't really give a shit about this old lady. He just wanted to beat up Butch. But she says, oh, you're the only person who's ever done anything kind for me. From now on, you will have good luck. I'll, make sure that everything goes your way. And she says, if you ever need me again, I'll be here for you. So it seems to work. The years pass. He becomes very successful, very rich. Terry does. Becomes a gangster, actually, in Chicago. But then Butch also becomes a gangster in New York, and then he's going to move in on the Chicago territory, and he succeeds. He wipes out Terry's organization. I just want to go back here. So I just like looking at this weird Bruce Jones art. Like, some panels are really good. It's definitely rough, but I mean, it definitely has that early Kaluta feel too. So all those guys were hanging out. Bruce Jones was hanging out with Jeff Jones and, Mike Kaluta. It's kind of a shame Bruce Jones didn't draw more. So like I said, Terry's wiped out, but he remembered the promise of the old witch lady, and he goes back to visit her. And she says, I'll give you even more luck if you look after my niece. Or is it her grandniece? Something like that. She shows up, and it's a pretty good deal because she's fucking hot. She kind of becomes his gun moll, and he starts raking in the dough again. Everything's going great. But then Butch shows up, and even though he's got the witch lady's luck, Butch has more men, more firepower, and he takes down his organization once again. In the bargain, he says, I'm taking this girl too. And all of a sudden, the young woman turns into the old witch. And she says, when I was with Terry, I was beautiful, and I gave him good luck. Now you have me, and I'm going to be this ugly old witch, and you're going to have nothing but bad luck. And I'm not going to leave your side ever. So he loses every penny and ends up in the gutter. And the witch is still by his side. She's like, you'll suffer forever for killing Terry. Another 2-pager by Marv Channing and Morrow. Gray Morrow. Nice stuff. This is a kind of goofy one. It's a very odd story. The Benefactor. Story by T.K.C. Brennan. And it says art by J. Hack, which probably is a pseudonym. This could be Vicente Alcazar. It looks like him. Or Carlos Pino. But this is like this guy who almost looks like an alien. And he lives with this other guy. And he's all like... apparently he has this gift he wants to give to humanity, to anyone. And he keeps trying and failing. And this guy says something like, I want no part of your gift, Gabriel. I know you're a stranger from a strange land, though I do not know what strange land. I do not wish to be as you, nor do I envy you. Just like really weird. So he goes to this bridge and he sees this woman, and he's telling her all this stuff about how, I see many things in your eyes, There was times when you trusted those you should have feared. Now you fear those you should trust. That's the problem with mankind. Nobody trusts each other, blah, blah, blah. If people would only love each other. And the woman's like runs from him. She says, I know you're not evil, but this is too all-encompassing. I can't deal with it. So he goes back to the place, and the guy says, you failed again, didn't you? He says, yeah. So I don't know if he's supposed to be an angel or something. It just doesn't tell you. It's very nebulous. Kind of dumb. But I mean, at least it's interesting because I had no fucking clue what was going to happen. Nothing does happen, but I was like, what the hell is this story? Another one of the essays into the supernatural, Possession and Exorcism. Text and art by Gray Morrow. Okay. Number 8. Gray Morrow cover again. Here's a nice addition to the roster. Frank Thorne joins the team. This story is by Don Carr and Frank Thorne art. And this is the highwayman's escape. And there's this evil highwayman who's just been killing his whole life, and robbing. And they've got him cornered. He's almost getting away, but then his horse throws him. So this passerby, this old man, he kills him, takes his horse. Look at that, Joe Kubert. Frank Thorne, I mean, he had his own style, but it was so, indebted to Kubert, which is great, because, I mean, he took all the good things of Kubert and added some more of his own little ticks. So he fights his way out, kills the sheriff, and rides off. And then all of a sudden, he's just like, I don't remember this part of the forest, and everything starts getting weird, like a nightmarish. These demons are chasing him. He rides into this giant spider's web. All these cute little demons attack him. I like this when he slices them in half. He draws no blood. They're just solid. And if you noticed, all the colors have gone wonky, Falls into the ocean. And he gets picked up by this pirate ship. And the captain, it's pretty obvious he's the devil. And they tie him up as a galley slave. And all the people he killed, they're cracking the whip on him and pounding the drum. And for all eternity, he's going to have to do that. So this is one of those typical old stories, like you've seen it before in Twilight Zone, where he died. He didn't escape those guys when his horse threw him. And this was his feverish death dream, Pretty fun. Another story by Marvin Channing, illustrated by Gray Morrow. Look at this. The quality of color on this cheap newsprint. It's amazing. So, stuff like this, it almost looks like, like it's full process color, but a little muted and faded. But I guess it just goes to show you, this comics could have looked this good all the time. It was just it took a lot of work. The colorist had to really care and slow down and take his time. Pretty amazing, though. Die in the Name of the Law. This is the cover story. This is written by Marv Channing and drawn by Gray Morrow once again. So we see this guy who's a pulp collector. He loves the old pulps, and his favorite is the Cobra. That's this guy. Really nice art in this. So one day he sees a mugging. He sees a guy get away with murder. And he's thinking about it. He's like, the only way to deal with scum like that is the way the Cobra would have, a bullet in the head. And he starts obsessing about this. It even gets to the point, he starts hearing the Cobra in his mind. The Cobra's all like, yeah, you've got to continue my work. You got to go out there and kill all the scum. And so he does. He starts going out at night and killing people, bad people. His wife is worried. She's like, you're never here. What's going on with you? And he's just like, I got work to do. He even starts dressing up like the Cobra when he kills people. Look at this amazing panel of his wife here. Just not just the quality of drawing, but the way the colors work. Like, I can't believe this is just a normal newsprint comic. That's amazing. So she's so fed up with her husband, she takes all of his pulps of the cobra and throws them in the fire. He comes home and sees what she's doing, and he loses it, and he shoots his own wife. And then the spirit of the cobra comes to him, and he says, I made you my instrument, and you failed me by committing a crime. You killed your wife in cold blood. She wasn't a criminal. So you are now, though, and you know what you must do. And so he puts the gun up to his head and is going to mete out justice to himself. Another Essays into the Supernatural. It's about poltergeists. Frank Thorne draws this one, though, over Marvin Channing's script. Pretty fun stuff. Enough to Raise the Dead by Don Glut, writer, and Carlos Pino, artist. This is a lot better Carlos Pino art, a little more expressive and interesting. It's pretty much like the Mozart Soliari story. There's a composer who's really jealous of this other composer who's a genius and everyone loves him. And his admiration for him turns to jealousy and then to hate. I really like these drawings here. It's really nice stuff. So the jealous composer sneaks into his house, and he sees he's got a new composition on his piano. He starts playing it, and it's so beautiful. He forgets that, like, hey, I'm going to wake up the guy, but he does. The genius composer comes out. He's dressed in these, like, I don't know, warlock robes, and the jealous composer kills him, steals the composition, and claims it for his own. And now he's got people hear it and are blown away. So he's got this huge concert booked, and he's playing. And as soon as he starts playing the music, we see the grave of the genius composer, and it raises him from the dead, the music. That's a really good panel here. I love that. And the corpse walks all the way to the recital hall and kills the jealous composer. And then he sits down and continues to play the composition. And everyone's freaking out. I would totally stay. That would be like the best concert ever. Oh my God, this is so good. I forgot about this. So, The Man Who Tried to Kill Death, story by Marvin Channing and art by Alex Toth. And just look at this right off the bat. Alex Toth's panel layouts, the design work. He's such a master, Alex Toth. I love looking at his stuff. It's just, I never get tired of it. Just so beautiful and so readable, you know, like. So, this story is this guy, Jacques. He's on his deathbed and he doesn't want to die. He's young. He really just can't face it. So death comes and he's like, please, death, let me make a bargain with you. I'm a fine swordsman. I'll kill all these people for you if you let me live and send them to your kingdom. And Death says, I can't resist a good bargain. Okay. And he gives him his life back. Just great panel there. His exultation of being alive again. So he does that. I'm sorry, just every panel in here is killing me. Look at this. So good. So now that he's alive again, he basically does that. He duels all the guys he can and kills them. He becomes a pirate so he can kill more people. Jacques doesn't care who he fights. He just wants to send as a sacrifice to death. He wants to send, people. Everything's going great. He's got treasure. He's got women. But then Death shows up and says, your time is up, Jacques. I can't let you remain any longer. And Jacques' like, wait, give me one more. Let's bargain one more time. And Death can't resist. And he says, I'm a great swordsman. I want you to duel me. So he tries to fight Death. Of course, Death wins and runs him through. Alex Toth. I mean, these are pretty dopey comics for the most part. I mean, beautifully drawn, but just for that story. And he does another story in one of these. I think this one. Number 9, Gray Morrow cover. Oh, here we go. If I Were King. Script by Marvin Channing, art by Alex Toth. This is a fucking tour de force. This is just beautiful storytelling cartooning at its best. We see this guy, Myron. He's a total nebbish. Everyone kind of picks on him and bullies him because he's such a pushover. He has a very boring life, very lonely. Every night, though, he makes sure to watch Kincaid. He's like a Johnny Carson guy. He's rich, he's attractive, he's smooth. Everyone loves him, and he wants to be him. So he goes to this, an old gypsy woman, and he says, can you do something with your black magic? I want to be Kincaid. Look at this right here, the colors. I'm pretty sure Alex Toth, being such a consummate cartoonist, most guys didn't even deal with the colors. But in all these Alex Toth stories, there's such crazy colors that you'd never see. I think he had a hand in it. I think he would go and be like, hey, I want this for the colors. Look at this. This is just amazing. It's almost like Degas or something. Like all these little blips of color. Just looks great. And so the gypsy woman agrees. And she says, yeah, I could turn you into Kincaid. But she says, you'll have to stay him forever. That's the thing. He's like, oh, I don't care. That's what I want. So it works. And he takes over Kincaid's life, basically. You know, he's beloved by fans. He's rich. Everything seems great. But then when he gets home to his wife, because Kincaid is married, she's a total shrew. She's just yelling at him and insulting him. And he's like, oh, God, this sucks. Once again, though, look at these beautiful colors. And then what's even worse than that is he goes out for a walk to get away from her. And some mafia thug grabs him. And apparently Kincaid owes a lot of money to the mob boss. And they're going to kill him tonight if he doesn't get the money. And they beat the shit out of him for good measure. Look at that great Alex Toth lettering. That cartoony lettering. Just every panel in here is fucking amazing. All these different styles even. You got to get this issue just for this alone. These 2 Alex Toth stories are gold. So he goes running back to the gypsy woman. He's like, please, please, I know you said you couldn't, I'd have to stay this way forever, but change me back. And I guess there is a loophole, so she says, okay. Once again, crazy coloring, this purple and pinks. And she zaps him back into Myron. And the next day, once again, look at that. Fucking gorgeous. The next day he's commuting to work and all the newspapers have headlines. Kincaid slain, gangland execution. So he just escaped his fate. This next one is The Devils in Borley by Pat Boyette. Another great addition to the roster. This is he writes it and draws it. I don't know if this is like supposedly true folklore or whatever, but apparently there's this medieval monastery. One of the monks and one of the nuns tried to elope, and they were caught, and they murdered them. That was their punishment. I guess the monastery was haunted after that. People kept seeing the nun. That's pretty scary looking, that skull-faced nun. People saw a headless horseman riding around, all this time, like for centuries. Finally, in like 1865, this reverend said, hey, I want to build a rectory here. And everyone was like, that's a bad idea, Reverend. This place has got bad mojo, spirits all around. But he does. And it's a beautiful building, but pretty quickly, all this poltergeist activity starts happening. And it's not much of a story. It's just basically recounting various incidents of poltergeist activity in this castle or this rectory. I like this one, this black hand just crawling on the floor by itself. Yeah, Pat Boyette's so good. I don't know if we've looked at Pat Boyette before. He Worked for decades, mostly for Charlton. It's weird. He just did a lot of stuff for Charlton. But he was all over the place, did lots of stuff for DC too. Totally unique style. He's a really good cartoonist. Pretty much unsung. It's not like there were Pat Boyette fans out there, but I think now they're, in the past 10, 20 years, people are realizing how great he was. Probably studied Alex Toth a lot. So just more accounts of this crazy spectral activity in this rectory. Kind of fun. Another short story. Once again, Marvin Channing, art by Gray Morrow. We have the only half letter page in any of these. This one's called The Goal is Death by Marvin Channing and art by Vicente Alcazar. This is so goofy, this comic. This is Vampire. Classic looking old vampire. And he's actually lonely and he wants to be loved. So he says, I shall pretend to be one of the living. So he goes to a hockey game and he sees that the star player is so beloved. He's like, oh, I want that for myself. People really seem to love him. So he kills that guy and replaces him with his vampire powers somehow. Or enters his brain. I don't know how it works. I'm no vampire. I like this Alcazar art a lot more than when he's just doing it straight. Like just this panel, very stylized, more designy. So he goes home and apparently he has a wife. And because now he's the hockey player, everyone thinks he's the hockey player. And the wife knows that she senses it's not her husband. She's like, who are you? What have you done with Johnny? And he kills her and sucks her blood. So then that night he's playing and he loves it. He loves being a hockey player, hearing the cheers of the crowd. They all love him. But then he notices one of the hockey players has a crucifix. So it throws off his game and everyone starts booing him. So he starts playing even harder. The jeers kind of drive him to play even harder and faster. And the guy's crucifix falls into his glove. And he's having such a good time playing hockey, he doesn't even notice he's rotting, basically. And this last panel is he's totally like a skeleton. And shooting a goal. And all the hockey guys are like, wow, what the fuck is going on? And then he dissolves to nothing. Very silly story. Here we got Carlos Pino on art again with a story by Marvin Channing. And this is Come In and Meet the Piano Player. This woman's all like, oh, I like to have fun. I want to have some fun, a few laughs. I'm going to go in this bar. It's raining. And there's 4 other people there. And they're all having a nice time. No one knows each other, but they're like, hey, we just all met. And everyone's getting along. They're all fun-loving people. The proprietor is named Mr. L. And he's like, oh, the piano player will play anything you want. So Mr. L basically starts saying, oh, yeah, you're all fun-loving, aren't you? And he starts recounting tales of all of their lives, bad things that they did that nobody else knows. One by one, he goes through and tells like, oh, yeah, and you did this. And, of course, once again, it turns out that they actually all were on a plane that crashed, and they showed up here. So, and then he says, my name is Mr. Lucifer. You're going to be here for a long time. So once again, they're in hell. Good Lord, choke. So now we have number 10, another Gray Morrow cover. Kind of lackluster. You'd think with like pirates, that skeleton pirates would be pretty awesome, right? How could you go wrong? But it's kind of a boring cover. First story is Death Is My Love's Name. Story by Marvin Channing, art by Frank Thorne. And this one's kind of interesting. This artist paints his ideal woman, and he actually falls in love with the image. He's like, no woman could compare to her. And he falls in love with it so much that he doesn't want to turn it into the publisher. who commissioned him to paint it. He goes on dates, but he can't stop thinking about the woman in the painting. And he's just like, I'll do anything to, make you become real. So he gets this book on mind power, and it works. Here's a knock at the door, and it's her. She's alive. And for a couple days, it's bliss. But then he notices that, like, when they're in stores, she just steals stuff without a conscience. And he confronts her about it, and she says, conscience? When you created me, all you wanted was beauty. You didn't give me a conscience. So over the days and weeks, she just does horrible things, and she doesn't feel bad about it at all. Like, she destroys a bunch of his paintings just to be a jerk. But then it gets really bad. One night he's out thinking on a walk, thinking about what to do. And when he comes back, I guess one of his ex-girlfriends came by to talk to him, and she killed her in cold blood. And she doesn't feel an ounce of remorse about it. She's like, we'll be together forever. And he's like, I know what to do. So he runs to the publisher's place, and where the original painting is, and he slashes it. So when he comes home, she's all slashed up. And she's like, how could you do this to me? And they have a death struggle, and then they both fall out of their 20th-story window to their death. Dusty. I guess this was trying to take on Barbie. I don't think any of my sister's friends had those. Essays into the Supernatural presents horror films. It's kind of weird. Just showing 4 great horror actors, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff. Really nice caricatures by Gray Morrow. That guy could do anything. Script by Marvin Channing again. Oh, this is nice. We get another Howard Chaykin drawn story. Never seen this. It's Howie Chaykin, it says. Stories by Marv Channing. It's called Pirate Island. It's pretty nice Howard Chaykin stuff. I noticed the first page is pretty well drawn, and then it gets really loose. I think Howard Chaykin ran out of time or something on this one. But this guy just wants adventure in his life. He quits his boring accounting job, buys a sloop, and starts sailing around the world. He gets in a ship, his ship crashes. He ends up on this island. And these pirates, like right out of a storybook, conk him on the head and what's that word? They Shanghai him. He says, I'll give you a chance to live if you duel me and win. So he's a pretty good swordsman, this guy. He actually strikes a fatal blow to him, but he's like, I'm already dead, you can't kill me. I guess these pirates, every 10 years, appear on Earth. They have one day to have fun. Because when they were being hanged back in the 1700s, right as they were being hanged, they all made this vow, and I guess it worked. So they get to come back to life every 10 years. They see like a cruise ship, and they attack it, and they sink it, and take all the booty. And our hero's had enough of this shit. He's just like, I'm out of here. He jumps into the water. So he gets picked up, has to go to a hospital for a while. But then he goes back to that island. And he wants to get to the bottom of it. And there's a note from the pirate captain in this satchel. Should you survive and one day return to the island, keep our memory alive. And he vows to come back in 10 years. This guy, it's almost like he's kind of misses these pirates who try to kill him. Channing Morrow again on the short story. Here's a new edition. Al McWilliams drawing a story by Ed Newsom. One Evening on a Small Planet. This is kind of like a little humorous one. I usually don't like Al McWilliams. He usually bores the shit out of me, but it seems like he's really trying on this one. Like, look at that. It's almost got Wally Wood shading it's a lot better than most of the stuff he did. Al McWilliams did tons of stuff for Gold Key for like, I don't know, at least a decade, probably 2 decades. Just so many stories for them. So this one's just kind of a goofy one. An alien ship is finally seen on Earth from another planet. The whole world's, stopped still. We see the 2 aliens come out of the ship, and we realize that one is kind of a realtor and the other one's a possible buyer. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I really like the landscaping here. It's a pretty good price for a planet this size. Yeah, but I think my wife will like this as a vacation place. But you are going to do something about these nasty bipeds, right?" And the realtor's like, of course. We're going to bring in a good exterminator. We'll have them cleaned out in a few hours. So they leave. He's like, "Yeah, I got to talk it over with the wife, but I'm probably going to take it." And everyone on Earth is like, "What?" Not knowing that they've got like 24 hours to live. How cute. Here's another Al McWilliams story, this time written by Marvin Channing, The Prince of Evil. This is another goofy one. We see this famous horror actor, and everyone, like, even when he's off set, they fear him. This guy's really creepy. It's almost like he's playing himself. That's why he's such a good horror actor. And this one woman says, "I understand he's married. His wife must live in constant terror." And then we see him get into his limo and his wife's there, and she's henpecking him. She's a total harridan. And he's like, "Yes, dear." So that's the joke. Oh, this is a weird one. Demon Rider. This is written by T. Casey Brennan. Pencils by Jack Abel and inks by Wally Wood. At this time, Jack Abel was an assistant to Wally Wood. So I'm sure Wally Wood called up someone and said, "Hey, give this new kid a job. I'll even ink it, so you'll know it'll look pretty good." Look at these weird colors here. This little funny demon. So this guy basically one day, he's got this demon on his back, and he knows that it's like, "Are you the ghost of some long dead enemy?" And the problem is he's got a lot of enemies, this guy. He's fucked over a lot of people in his life. So he's trying to figure it out. Are you the ghost of this one person? And he has flashbacks. So when he's a little kid, a teenager, beats this little nerdy kid to within an inch of his life. And the demon's all like, "No, it's not him." He thinks about this old couple that he cheated on his way to the top. He convinced them to sign this shitty contract. Stole all their money, basically. And the demon's like, "No, not them either." Thinks about his old partner, who he totally ruined and stole his wife for good measure. He's like, "No, it's none of them. It's like, I am you. I am all the evil things you forced yourself to be. You created me and cultivated me to bring me to the life I now know. I know now. I am your evil. And I'm going to be around a long time." Oy vey. That's some heavy stuff. Okay, we got one more, number 11. Once again, gray Morrow cover. Very lackluster. That is so dull. Once again, we have a demon on a guy's back. Very weird. First story is once again Marvin Channing and art by Vicente Alcazar. This one's called "I Want to Die." I like this worm's eye point of view of these guys burying someone, or burying us. So we meet this guy. He's like this kind of blessed, this guy. He's a total playboy. There's no thrill he hasn't experienced. He'll try anything once. He's always searching for new kicks and new thrills. His friend introduces him to this woman, and he's like, "Oh, she shares a lot of your viewpoints. She kind of likes living life the same way you do." So they totally become lovers and get along great. One night as they're driving, she says, "You haven't tried murder or death yet." He's like, "Yep, those are the only 2 things I haven't experienced." And she starts teasing him. She says, "I bet you don't have the courage to kill anyone." And he says, don't make fun of me. Don't dare me. And she keeps doing it. So all of a sudden, he sees a guy on the side of the road, and he totally smashes his car into him and kills him to prove her wrong. I just want to stop right here. Look at this amazing illustration here, showing the headlights piercing the darkness. Just amazing, scratchy. It almost looks like Thomas Ott, that great European cartoonist. And just even this stuff, all the lines. Some nice stuff. I love this panel, too, of her face. Looks very Neil Adams-y, actually. So he kills this guy, stops the car, and he's kind of proud of himself. He's kind of excited. He's like, I did it. What do you think of my nerve now? And she's like, oh, my God, you idiot. What have you done? I was only trying to bust your chops. I didn't mean it. You fucking, you're out of your skull, you macho freak. I'm calling the cops. So he's like, oh, no, you don't. I got a taste for murder now. And he chases her down and strangles her. That's another great panel. Great designy panel. So he realizes that the cops are going to find the bodies, and they're going to pin it on him. So he goes to this witchy lady. There's a lot of gypsy witchy ladies in these comics, aren't there? And he says, I want you to basically kill me for a year. And then after a year, you'll resurrect me. Because they can't pin a crime on a dead man. So it'll be the perfect alibi. So he dies. And of course, he has to spend a year in hell. Because he is dead. And the only thing that gets him through it is knowing that, he only has to do it for a year. And finally, he wakes up after a year. And he's in the grave. Look at that great drawing there. Totally reminds me of, remember, that South American guy, F. Solano Lopez? I would totally think that was a panel by him. The way he draws the eyes here. And great hands here, pushing up at the coffin. He hears a commotion. He's just like, is that the witch lady? Come on, come get me. But it's not. It's these grave diggers who are burying Lady Madame Magdalena, the witch lady. I guess she just died like the day before. And of course she won't be able to dig him up. So she's like, no. He's going to die in his grave forever. That's a nice one. Essays into the Supernatural, Voodoo. Channing and Morrow again. This one's called The Eyes of Cagliostro. And this is I think this is T. Casey Brennan. Oh no, this is Don Glutt, writer. And Jack Abel, but the Grand Comic Database puts a question mark. It also says Ernie Colin, question mark. So I don't know who drew this. But it's pretty good. There's some nice panels in here. But I definitely do see some Jack Abel, so I think they're right about that. I don't know about Ernie Colin. I don't really see that. See that? Oh, that's so Jack Abel. So they're talking about the legend of Cagliostro. How he could just stare into your eyes and make you do stuff. And this guy gets the powers of Cagliostro. He can make anyone obey his commands. So, of course, he makes himself rich. But then he realizes that I've got to finish Cagliostro's wishes. He basically wanted the whole world to, die. So he books himself on a TV show. And he's going to hypnotize everyone. And basically tell them to, I don't know, kill the person next to you. But the original dude, he's fighting it. Because Cagliostro's possessed him. And he finally gets power of his own body back from Cagliostro and just jumps into jumps to his death. Kind of weird and silly. This is Monster on My Back. Story by Don Glutt. Art by this guy, Jerry Mooney and Gray Morrow. It looks very Gray Morrow-y, so I would assume this guy, Jerry Mooney, just did the layouts. I looked up Jerry Mooney. I couldn't find out if he was related to Jim Mooney, the DC cartoonist, but Jerry Mooney didn't do many comics. But it seems like he did animation and, graphic design for magazines, and even did a strip for Mad in like 96. But there's not much at the Grand Comics database under his name. We see this thuggish guy, and he's going to rob this occult shop. He doesn't have much cash, so he's like, oh, there must be something around here worth money. The proprietor of the shop is very unfazed. She's just like totally helpful. Just like, sure, take anything you want. I'm not going to try to stop you. He finds this little beautiful chest, and he runs back to his apartment, and this demon jumps out of it and just sits on his back. And it's heavy, and it's getting heavier and bigger every moment. Nobody else can see it, though. Everyone just sees him hunched over. So he's like, I gotta do something. This thing's killing me. And finally, he falls to the ground, and the demon just, like, crushes him. It's almost like he just wrinkles him up like an old rag. And the cops show up and be like, God, what could have done that to a human being? What the fuck? And then the proprietress of the occult shop shows up, and she takes the chest back. This is kind of interesting. Instead of having a 2-page short story to satisfy postal regulations, this guy Bob Holland wrote this poem, and then Gray Morrow did this color, I can't remember what they call that. There's a word for this, when like they just put the color on without the ink, and then the words are just floating over it. Pretty nice effect. It's called The Spectre. Nothing to do with the DC character, obviously, but I kind of like this. Just the effect of it. The poem's not very good. Here we have another story and art by Pat Boyette story, and it's called The Visitor. And once again, it's a story about Merlin. Man, I really love Pat Boyette's cartooning. Just so clear. Very unique style. So I guess they're talking about how Merlin was half demon, half human. And so when he dies, he's going to have to go to the land of the demons. And these demons are kind of funny looking. They're kind of like cartoonily drawn, but they look great. But then he says, wait a second, but I'm half human. So you shouldn't have, total hold on me. So then the spirit of death shows up. That's a great drawing. Love that. All of these are great drawings. Really nice stuff. So basically the death says, yeah, well, I guess you are half human, so we're going to compromise. You're going to get to not be, you're going to get to reside on Earth, but you're going to be in this old gnarled tree. This will be your resting place. I love the way he draws this gnarled oak. It's great design. And that's Merlin's fate. So there you have it. Red Circle Sorcery, 6 through 11. The only issues of Red Circle Sorcery. I hope you liked it. These comics are kind of goofy, but man, some nice art in these. And some you gotta have. These Alex Toth stories, some of these Pat Boyette stories. These are must-have comics in my book, even though the stories are silly. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.